Imagine a sea route that could shorten journeys between the Atlantic and Pacific, bypass crowded canals, and potentially shift trade patterns across continents. That is the promise of the Northwest Passage, a web of Arctic waterways running through Canada's far north. For centuries it was treated like a myth, then a curse, and now a strategic possibility. What makes it so powerful is not just geography. It sits at the intersection of exploration history, climate science, international law, and hard shipping economics. So this is not simply a story about a map line in the Arctic. It is a story about how physical landscapes can suddenly matter again when technology, climate, and politics change at the same time. The Northwest Passage forces governments, companies, and analysts to ask difficult questions: who controls it, who can safely use it, and whether the world is prepared for the consequences if this frozen corridor becomes a regular maritime route. Geographically, the Northwest Passage is not a single canal-like channel. It is a network of straits and channels weaving between islands of the Canadian Arctic archipelago. These waterways connect the North Atlantic side to the Pacific side through routes that vary in depth, ice conditions, and navigational risk. That matters because when people hear the phrase, they often imagine one clean path. In reality, captains and planners deal with options, bottlenecks, and seasonal constraints. Some sections are narrow and shallow, and conditions can shift quickly due to drifting sea ice. Weather visibility can collapse. Ice pressure can trap ships even in years with lower overall ice cover. So the route is best understood as a moving navigational puzzle rather than a permanent marine highway. The promise is distance savings in some voyages, but the operational reality is uncertainty, and uncertainty in shipping translates directly into insurance costs, scheduling risk, and potentially expensive delays. The obsession with this route began long before modern icebreakers or satellite forecasts. European powers sought a western or northern path to Asian markets, hoping to avoid long southern voyages and rival-controlled choke points. Explorers sailed with incomplete charts, limited cold weather knowledge, and enormous political pressure to deliver a breakthrough. Many expeditions became cautionary tales of ambition colliding with Arctic reality. Ships were trapped, crews starved, and rescue missions sometimes produced more tragedy than relief. Yet the search continued generation after generation because the strategic reward seemed so large. If a dependable northern route existed, it could have reshaped imperial trade centuries earlier. In that way, the Northwest Passage became more than a geographic objective. It became a symbol of national prestige, scientific curiosity, and economic desire. Even repeated failure did not end the pursuit, because each failed voyage still expanded mapping knowledge and narrowed the unknown. By the mid-19th century, the passage was effectively proven in stages, but not in a way useful for commercial shipping. Robert McClure's expedition is often credited with discovering an icebound route in 1850, yet completion required extraordinary effort, including over-ice travel by sledges rather than smooth ship transit. Around the same period, John Ray charted more southerly areas and added crucial geographic understanding. These milestones were historic, but they also revealed an inconvenient truth: finding a route on paper is not the same as opening a route in practice. A corridor can exist and still be functionally closed by conditions that make routine navigation too dangerous or too slow. This distinction is essential even today. Policymakers and media often celebrate firsts, but shipping firms care about repeatability. Can a vessel transit on schedule, safely, and at acceptable cost? 19th century achievements answered where the passage was. They did not answer whether it could underpin reliable trade. The first complete ship transit is usually associated with Roald Amundsen, who navigated through from 1903 to 1906. That voyage was a triumph of patience, seamanship, and adaptation, not speed. It took years, included wintering, and relied on deep local knowledge and survival discipline. In narrative terms, Amundsen proved possibility. In logistical terms, he also proved difficulty. A route that takes multiple seasons with prolonged pauses is not a modern cargo solution. Still, His success ended a long era of pure speculation and gave future planners a concrete precedent. It demonstrated that skilled crews with the right vessel profile could complete the transit, even before contemporary navigation tools. The legacy is important because today's debates sometimes swing between extremes, either dismissing the passage as fantasy or assuming it is already a plug-and-play trade lane. Amundsen's journey reminds us that truth often sits in between, possible, valuable in specific contexts, but inherently demanding. For most of the 20th century, persistent Arctic pack ice blocked regular commercial use for much of the year. The route remained episodically navigable but strategically limited. What changed was not a political treaty or a sudden engineering breakthrough. It was the ice itself. Declining sea ice linked primarily to climate change has increased seasonal navigability in parts of the Arctic system, including sections relevant to the Northwest Passage. That does not mean the route is now easy. It means the window of potential operation has widened enough to attract serious commercial and state attention. This is a critical distinction. Opening probability is different from guaranteed accessibility. You can have lower average ice and still face dangerous ice concentrations, variable drift, and year-to-year volatility that can disrupt planning. But from a market perspective, even partial opening can trigger experimentation. Once shippers believe occasional transit is feasible and profitable for certain vessel classes, trial voyages begin, and trial voyages reshape strategic expectations. Then comes the sovereignty conflict, which may be as decisive as the ice conditions. Canada treats the Northwest Passages as internal waters, meaning it claims authority similar to control over waters within its territory. The United States argues key routes function as an international strait, where transit passage should remain open and not depend on unilateral national permission. This legal disagreement is not abstract. It affects regulation, environmental oversight, military mobility, and commercial predictability. If a route is internal water, the coastal state can impose stricter controls. If it is an international strait, freedom of navigation principles carry more weight. Companies deciding whether to build Arctic strategies care deeply about legal certainty. So do insurers and naval planners. Ambiguity increases risk premiums and political friction. And because the Arctic is becoming more economically interesting, unresolved legal positions that were once mostly theoretical now matter in practical, expensive ways. In short, law and ice are now intertwined in the passage's future. Even if politics were solved tomorrow, physical constraints still limit the passage's commercial role. Depth is one of the biggest issues. Reports that parts of the eastern end may be around 15 meters deep raise hard limits for larger, deeper draft vessels. Modern global shipping relies heavily on scale. Bigger ships usually reduce cost per container or per ton. But scale only works where waterways and ports can handle that draft safely. If sections of the Northwest Passage constrain vessel size or loading condition, some of the theoretical distance advantage can evaporate. Operators might need partial loads, specialized hulls, or slower transit to manage risk. That means economics become route-specific, cargo-specific, and season-specific. You do not get one universal answer. Some ships, some commodities, and some schedules may benefit. Others may not. This is why analysts who frame the passage as a straightforward replacement for existing routes usually overstate the near-term reality. A widely discussed modern signal came when large commercial vessels began proving selective viability. One notable case was the Nordic Orion's 2013 transit, often highlighted because of cargo scale and its implication that Arctic routing can unlock loading or path options unavailable through other choke points for certain drafts. Later, major shipping players, including Chinese interests such as COSCO, expressed interest in regular use as experience accumulated. These developments mattered not because they instantly transformed global shipping, but because they shifted perception from theoretical to operational. Once a major operator completes a route, every competitor and insurer takes notice. Data replaces speculation, fuel consumption, transit timing, escort requirements, weather delays, and ice-related contingencies become measurable. That does not guarantee mass adoption, but it moves the conversation into business planning territory. In infrastructure history, that transition is pivotal. A route becomes real not when first discovered, but when decision-makers begin treating it as one option in an actual portfolio. The comparison everyone makes is with legacy choke points like the Panama Canal, and that comparison is useful only if handled carefully. Panama offers established infrastructure, predictable governance frameworks, and deep operational routines. The Northwest Passage offers potential distance and strategic diversification under the right conditions. So the real question is not which route wins outright. It is how shipping networks evolve when an additional route becomes intermittently viable. Diversification can have value even if a route handles only a modest share of traffic, because it provides optionality during disruptions, congestion events, or geopolitical tensions elsewhere. But optionality has a price: ice-class compliance, Arctic navigation expertise, specialized insurance, and contingency planning. This means the passage is more likely to emerge first as a niche strategic corridor for selected cargoes and operators rather than a universal replacement artery. Over time, if infrastructure, forecasting, and governance improve, that niche could expand, but likely unevenly and with periodic setbacks. Beyond commerce, the Northwest Passage sits inside a broader Arctic transition with security and governance implications. As access improves, states pay closer attention to surveillance, search and rescue capacity, environmental response readiness, and maritime domain awareness. Increased traffic in fragile ecosystems raises the stakes of accidents, fuel spills, and response time gaps in remote conditions. So the passage debate is not only about shipping profit or legal doctrine. It is about whether institutions can keep pace with a changing physical environment. Who funds ice monitoring? Who coordinates emergency operations across vast distances? Which rules govern transit standards and reporting obligations? These questions determine whether Arctic navigation develops as disciplined, cooperative management or as a series of reactive crises. The region's remoteness magnifies both cost and consequence. A minor incident in a temperate port can become a major emergency in high-latitude waters. Strategic planners understand this, which is why Arctic policy increasingly blends economic opportunity with resilience and risk mitigation. So what does the Northwest Passage represent right now? It is no longer a fantasy and not yet a stable mainstream highway. It is a conditional corridor whose importance is rising because climate dynamics, legal disputes, and trade strategy are converging. The best way to understand its future is to reject simple headlines. It is neither permanently blocked nor fully open. It is neither a guaranteed revolution nor an irrelevant relic. Instead, it is a high-variance route that rewards preparation and punishes assumptions. For governments, that means clarifying legal frameworks and investing in safety capacity. For companies, it means disciplined route economics rather than symbolic Arctic ambitions. For the public, it is a reminder that climate change does not only threaten coastlines and weather patterns, it also rewires geopolitics and logistics in places most people rarely see on a map. The Northwest Passage is becoming a test case for how humanity manages new access in a rapidly changing planet. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.